two to and three.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to LFG. I'm Ian Horne, and I don't particularly love long intros, so let's just get into this. We're going to be talking about Europe's second largest neobank, of course, is Bunq, and I'm joined by Joe Wilson. You've got an unusual title, right? You are Chief Evangelist. Can I just start with that? There's so much we can say about Bunq, I will do, but a Chief Evangelist, let's please tell us what that means.
I mean, look, the answer is in the question, right? So it's culture, voice, stories of the company, what's happening with it, how you translate between product and audience, things like that. But because of my history with the company, I've held a couple of roles in the company prior to coming back to do this. I also have access to pretty much any of the things that are going on if there's a way that I can help. So that's kind of what that means. I prefer, I think, these lesser defined specific roles when you can get them, because that gives you an opportunity to focus on impact as opposed to, I don't know, hours or structure or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's quite a nice point, though, actually. The fact that you're defined by what you think drives genuine movement rather than feeling like you need to fulfill a role. That's pretty cool. I mean, how did the conversation come about where the decision to give you this title was made?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of words that when you think about these things, chief storyteller was kind of like, very US, doesn't really work. Advocate sounds a little legal. So there's a few things that came in, and ultimately Evangelist was a guy kind of space in between. I think, Big Mouth was on the table at some point, a guy that, maybe somebody a ham that was probably put out there. But I think in the end, you just find something that's as descriptive as possible. But then again, here we are trying to describe it again in our conversation.
Amazing. Well, I think it's good. I'm only asking because it's unique, not because I have a problem with it. Also, I mean, Chief Evangelist, we'll get into this later, but there's a US launch happening soon. So I feel like it's very US appropriate to have that. One day Bunq will be filling out a mega church or something like that.
Let's not say religion. That is not, we're not going to mix those things. That is not the way this is referenced. Just to be clear, all listeners, please note, this is not a religious context.
Great stuff. So having done religion, politics next.
Yeah, good.
No, of course not. Anyway, Joe, so Bunq's doing very well at the moment, right? Europe's second largest neobank, over 20 million users, I believe, and 85 million euros in profit last year, which is really quite something. So what's the main story at the moment? What's the main thing that's keeping you busy?
As a company, I think you want to look at, growth, right? It's important that everyone understand, if you're listening to this, you're generally interested in fintech. That's who your audience is about. And maybe you're interested in banking, or the way these two things merge, because you said all these things are this digitization of all. But look, this is a company and an organization and a place driven by a user. There are a few companies that I've been involved with, and if you look at my history, you've seen a lot, that basically have an obsessive, relationship with the person who's using the app. And so every decision, everything that goes on. So we're busy with growth. We're busy with expansion because it's in demand. We're being asked, can you go here? Can you open this up here? Can you go that? The whole US expansion began based on user demand. People between US and Europe living between these two different places saying, look, it'd be so much easier if I could get this experience over here. How soon can you do that? Let's go figure that out.
Yeah, and the profitability, I think, is worth dwelling on as well, because it's, scale and growth is one thing, but doing it while achieving, as I was saying, 85 million euros in profit is quite something else. So how have you achieved it? Why is Bunq able to be profitable when others perhaps aren't?
Yeah, in the history of that goes back a bit, right? Because it was the first ever profitable neobank amongst all the great stories we can tell today and all the different ones that we may all know. And again, I guess Europe leads a bit on neobanks because in the US it's a bit different. But why were we able to do it? I'm going to sort of repeat this same answer a few times. And if you ask these questions, this obsession on the user put us into a model where we were looking at the value of subscriptions very early on. So we leaned on the subscription model because it's what people were asking for. I'd rather have a single price and have everything wrapped into that and not have a bunch of crap or shit sort of sticking. I want just simple. And that allowed us to expand, and then we grow on the back of that. So I would say that plus, this is kind of in some cases there are, and I won't limit this to neobanks, but I'll say in fintech, but also neobanks, there's a very VC driven model where you take monstrous amounts of investment and your board is complicated and you're driven by a lot of models that are, in this case, we have a founder who's on his third success story. So he knows how to build companies, and he wires and construction machines it in a way that he knows will work. And we're driven through technology. So we take that path through the tech. Essentially, if you look at our revenue and our profitability, when some of the other neobanks were at this level, if they ever crossed it, some didn't, the number of employees was triple or quadruple what we have. So there's an efficiency wired in on top of this user obsession.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The subscription model, I think, is worth drilling into.
Yeah.
Could you talk us through that? Because a number of people listening to this won't be Bunq customers. Yeah, how do the subscriptions work?
Oh, it's simple. You can go to Bunq and look at subscriptions. You can go to bunq.com
Yeah.
and look at those. You can pick it up in the app, but it's very simple. Like there is a free version, there's a small cost version, and it goes all the way up to like $20 a month or 20 euros a month, where you can literally get everything included. And that has a volume of the types of things that our users would do. It's important to zero it back to who are these users that we're talking about. If I can just forward push this particular point, we are not a bank for every single consumer in the world or every business customer in the world. We centralize and we focus on a very particular demographic, and that is a digital nomad, a digital expat, someone who's living internationally between different systems. And we build technical solutions inside of a banking app that serve that audience, so we can create things that's specific to them. So at some point you may ask me, well, why would we succeed in the US when someone else hasn't? And I'm going to come back to that same answer, when we get to that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might as well jump into that. I feel like we're skirting around the US thing and not jumping into it. Let's just go straight there, because you've secured the FINRA broker dealer approval, right? So
Yes.
and now, am I right in saying you're pushing towards a full banking license? You don't have that
Yeah, we've applied. Yeah, it's public knowledge.
Yeah.
We've applied for that banking license. We're in that process with the OCC and the Fed and the regulatory authorities that create that. In the background, we're setting up what I would deem the machinery that allows you to run a bank inside the US. Those things are all happening in parallel.
Yeah, got you. So obviously, as you said, I mean, you've set me up for this already. There are lots of challenges already in the US,
Yeah.
lots of challenger banks. So, and you touched upon the digital nomad angle, but how would you best explain Bunq's unique angle? What's going to make it scale in America? What's going to make it work there? Is there a gap in the market that you've seen?
Yeah.
Even?
Yeah. So I think there's maybe 2 to 3 things happening at the same time. And we're going to kind of go a little macro industry and then back into Bunq, if that's okay, because I think it will make
Sure.
more
Yeah.
sense. The term neobank is a fun term, right? Because it sort of suggests like there's this thing unlike everything else, but I don't think that we're so incredibly new as we once were as an idea. Like, I mean, people use these, for many more, it's becoming their primary bank rather than their secondary bank. And what's happened over these years, this whatever decade of evolution that's gone on with neobanks, is that the demographic who uses these is also evolving, right? So it's no longer just your, high risk university student or this one specific, it's broadening and they're aging, and then it's becoming, a broader demographic that wants to use these banks. When you come to the US, so that's a macro kind of thing that's evolved. The neobank world has evolved. It's not the same. You can't think of it as it was 5 years ago, 7 years ago. You have to think of it in current terms. Then you look into the US and you say, okay, well, what's underbanked, underserved? Where can you offer something in the market? Again, same answers before. There is a particular demographic that we are specifically good at serving. This digital nomad, digital expat, international living situation. We are specifically dialed into the needs of that audience. So our entry into the US is in demand from that audience and will serve that audience in very specific ways. So that's not a strategy of go into the US, explode and compete with everyone and try and land the biggest noise out there. It's very much a precise approach of high value to a specific audience. And I think that will make one of the biggest differences that, than what people have tried in the past. And we feel pretty confident in it.
Yeah. Okay. And digital nomads are a really interesting client base to
Yeah.
serve.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Joe, you're one yourself, right?
Undoubtedly. I fit into that category. And I should not say I'm not alone in this, because I have both spouse and a family that we have dragged across the planet. So there's
Wow.
7 different countries, 3 different continents. I've had kids that were raised internationally who sort of see the world as a home. In the US, there's few of them went back to the US for university because it was exotic compared to, where they lived. So we kind of exist in that space as with some depth and knowledge, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking to that specific cohort of which you're a member, how is it that, that's obviously really useful experience, but how does being a Bunq customer yourself work for you? I feel like I'm making this very easy for you from a marketing perspective.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
such a
Thanks.
softball question, but it's relevant, right? You
Yeah,
are a digital nomad. So if you could talk us through the ways that
yeah.
the account could,
I
I'll
mean,
let you
look,
have this one.
anyone, thanks for the softball. Anyone who has lived in multiple countries, has encountered the problems that we encounter, right? Yeah, you set up a bank account for the first time. If you go to the US, it's a credit problem because you don't have any credit history, can't get credit card or all sorts of things. So these things exist. The Bunq's focus on both technology as well as kind of the depth in a local market, as well as our history with our current user base, allows us to sort of, again, I said, create technical solutions. So as an example, and I'm not professing a exact feature that we will have. I'm simply saying, here's an example of what I mean. If you had been existing in the Europe for a long time and you moved to the US, what would you need to land? Well, you would need an account, probably a savings account and a credit card. The last one's really hard to get. The first two might be hard to get because you have no credit history in the US. We, however, have connections, a single system that works across the both sides, and we can turn that on in 5 minutes. So that's basically the types of things that that audience requires and needs, and that we will be able to fulfill.
Yeah. So, what were the challenges in making that proposition possible? Because I feel like if you're working across jurisdictions and smoothing this whole
Yeah.
phase, that's got to be a difficult, potential
Yeah.
like regulatory question there.
So there's a couple layers in there. Like one is a regulatory. Like what is you have KYC. You have to know your. I'm speaking to non-banking people, so you know your customer. You have money laundering. You have all these things you need to guard for and against to make sure that your users are protected and that you have all of the technology around them that allows them to just make life easy and not sort of get caught up in all those pieces. So there's regulatory and then there's technical. Okay, so there's two levels. So regulatory, I think, can be, for us at least, it can be more complicated than the technical. I mean, you know, our technology is unique to neobanking in that everything is built here. It is our platform. It was designed. It is refreshed constantly. It moves. We own it end to end, every piece. It's us. We are the technical center. If you come and hang out in our headquarters, you'd feel way more like you were in a tech company than you were in a bank. It is who we are as a company. So there's a technical solution, which I don't think is there's nuances to ACH versus IBAN or things like that. Those aren't impossible. They take time. But then there's a regulatory, which means you have to be able to allow this technology to be used across those things. So I would say those are some of the hurdles that you cross, and they take a few steps to do, but we see both sides of the ocean open to this currently.
Yeah, got you. And going back to your experience as a digital nomad, have your personal experiences helped shape what you think Bunq should be? Has it helped you kind of reevaluate the proposition at all?
I don't want to overstate my influence. So it's not a tiny little company anymore. But I would think that more importantly than myself, but that particular user demographic, which is well defined and well known and exists throughout. You see me looking around because everyone in this company will ask you anything. They'll say, well, what does the user want? Do we have data? Does it prove that? So Joe's opinion is sort of good if it matches what everybody else wants.
Yeah.
But I think we're able to define that based on the needs like I described. So the answer is like maybe, but more importantly, back to the whole of the users that we serve.
Got you. And I'm going to zoom in again on the balance between digital nomad and you working at Bunq because you talked about neobanks being a more mature phase than they were years ago.
Sure.
And I think culturally, maybe the gaps between neobanks, banks, even like DeFi organizations are all kind of somewhat shifting. So how do you manage being a digital nomad and a senior leader at a major neobank? Because
Uh,
I think some people would look at that setup and think that's unworkable. Others would love it, but how do you make that fit?
I guess that depends on where you work, right? It has to do with that's a company question more so. I mean, you could ask me as from a personal level, how is it that we would live in multiple places and we can pull this off and have these jobs? Um,
Well, yeah, I would ask you that at a personal level. Actually, I think that's a good point. Like, how do you find it having this senior role, balancing that between traveling and being international?
It's a time zone question, man. More than anything else. It's really like your challenges will be logistics. Like, am I on the right time zone? Did I get that right? Are we all tuned in? Did we get the 4 hour, 8 hour window we can all talk? It's just about doing that. Really, it's a time zone question. Because for me and Bunq, like the work is the work. And that doesn't is not affected by where I am. I want to land in Amsterdam on a regular basis because I want to connect with people. I think there's a high value to office time as well as remote time, but ultimately it's a time zone question. So I actually don't find it. Maybe I'm just super well rehearsed, right? Maybe it's like you go through this long enough, but I live, if anybody wants the pro tip, it's all on the calendar. Everything is in the calendar. Like I can live through a well-managed calendar and have a high discipline in how I operate and also focus time specifically on like force multiplier activities rather than general stuff. And I can make it work pretty much from any time zone in the world.
I guess there's another question on that, which is that when you've joined Bunq, you've already proven yourself. You've got a pretty strong track record, or a very strong track record. But if you were a younger person coming through the organization, do you think it would be possible to build that sort of career while being a digital nomad?
Um, Let's go back to your comment about a strong track record. No one has a strong track record. We fill ourselves, I don't know, this could be controversial, but I think we all fill ourselves with our resumes and we get convinced we're great at something. I don't know. We get a time and a place and we do things and we either deliver or we don't. And if you can stack up enough, yes, we delivered, then maybe you have past history that says you could possibly. But you come to a place like Bunq, which is just known for the quality of talent that it has here, and you sort of feel like someone has let you into Harvard and they didn't know who you were. Like it's that smart. So I think you have to always kind of prove yourself again. To your question, can you do it being younger rather than sort of sitting on your experiences in the past? Yes, absolutely. I think people are doing it all over the place. The number of digital nomads is increasing year over year. Despite we weren't going to talk politics, but despite the complications and let's say the dynamic international situation we all live in right now, we still see this increase in people who want to live and work around the world. And there's more and more companies, maybe it's COVID, I don't know, that says, look, I want the talent. How do I operate with the talent? How do I get that talent to work for my company? Oh, it sits over there. Okay, let's just figure that out. I see more and more flexibility in that than I ever have. But you also see the side where, people are sort of requiring the in-office days and things like that. So that's all kind of coming crashing together right now. But it's a long way to get back to the if you were younger. I think what you do is you set your mindset. You say, I'm going to do it like that. And then you will find your way through that. Our life experience, my wife and I, and our kids was we didn't follow a company that sent us around the world. We decided we wanted to be someplace. We decided we wanted to live in India. So we went and lived in India, and either the company cooperated or didn't, or we worked it out on the other end. So you make these decisions. Our model, that's a long-winded answer, but our model as living is like experiences over possessions. That's for us how our lifestyle. That's why I get to sit and talk about being a digital nomad, because we made that decision a long time ago.
Got you. And how does that filter into your evaluation of employees? Because I think, in the past, it was easier to get jobs by, knowing the people you were around. It was, office politics, all that kind of stuff. And that stuff still holds true, right? Let's be honest.
Probably. Yeah.
And obviously you're moving towards a more digital nomad kind of model. I assume there are more people working within Bunq that are digital nomads besides yourself. How do you make sure that everyone is, judged fairly on their outputs?
I mean, you're asking a question from what I consider to be a very old world point of view, if you don't mind. Like it's like, if I was at a giant brick company looking at, I'm like, how do you even judge these guys if they're not here in the office? And it's more like there's a set of requirements, there's a set of metrics, there's a set of outputs. People are delivering or not delivering on these things, and you build a relationship. Even if you lived in the same office and you had a company with like 2 days in the office or 3 days in the office requirements, there's quite a possibility that 50% or 70% of all of your time would still be in like meetings like this, right? So I think that this is a skill set that just exists in the workplace today. And if you don't have it, I mean, probably it's time to go, right? You got to be able to work digitally. Yeah, that's my best answer for that.
No, fair enough. I appreciate you're not the head of HR as well.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I think it's good to ask these things, though, because I work remotely as well, Joe. I can travel, I can do all that stuff. And I just think it's good to pose the question just to see how people respond to it. Especially
so maybe the shorter answer is like
very kind of, digital nomad focused, right?
Yeah, I think the shorter answer then is focus on the company. If this is your choice on lifestyle, focus on the companies that get great feedback on this. Like you can, there's nothing you can't know, right? You can search, like you can find anything you want to know about a company. You can find anything you want to know from Glassdoor to what, like you can go put these two things together. If you just show up one day at a company and you're mad because they don't measure you right as a remote worker, you chose the wrong company. Like you could have chosen different. So keep that in mind.
Great stuff. Okay, well, we've made it about 20 minutes into a recording, and we haven't talked about AI, which
Uh,
might be a record in 2026 for a fintech podcast.
100% a record. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've broken new or old ground there. I'm not sure which, but it's one of the two. Let's talk about this because Bunq has made a claim to be the first bank in Europe to fully rebuild its backend, as AI native. What does that transformation look like from the inside, and what things did you have to kind of break and pull apart to get there?
Yeah, I think, one of the inside views of this is to understand that we were pushing AI, as we call it. So for everyone listening, AI is a terrible name. It doesn't really mean anything. Underneath it, there's a lot of details and technology that we could talk about. We need to separate Gen AI and agentic AI. All disclaimers in place. Okay, so we were working on this. We were building this. We were doing this long before it was ever really cool or LLMs or that. A lot of it came out of the need. We have this remarkable recruiting process, and we get extremely high quality talent. And our sort of general view was to lift these people up rather than to just cycle everything out. So the components of automation and then eventually prediction and machine learning and then into what we know as AI and LLMs were all built from a internal perspective of how to really grow the organization with fewer people and greater output. So it starts that way. And it starts on things that you can't, I don't know the stories people tell. Like I woke up on Saturday and vibe coded a cool app. And then by Monday, the whole company was AI. But our experience was very different in that you have to launch it. You have to present it to consumers. You have to go through this process. And we had multiple layers in this over years to get it so that it could be as reliable as it is. So, it's across everything that we do. Certainly, you can see the Gen AI components and taking over 90% plus of customer support with 90% plus satisfaction ratings. Involved in the way that we code. It's involved in the way that we market, HR, all these things. So it works its way across all of what we do. But I would say we grew into this rather than just waking up late to the game and jumping in. So we're very much an OG on AI as this goes, and it's because we're such a technical organization.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I mean, have you got any kind of hard numbers on the improvements that AI has brought? I realize a lot of it can be quite structural at the start, right? And like you say, you're trying to figure out how you can reconfigure systems and so on. But have you noticed any difference to the bottom line?
I wouldn't quote any numbers. I mean, it's not because I'm dodging your question as much as I don't want to put a number on. I don't want to put a number on it I just
Yeah.
don't think it would help. I mean, I can tell you. You asked for improvement. I can tell you achievement. 97% of all customer support first line is handled by, what we consider Gen AI or AI. That is a 90% plus satisfaction rating. So if you put those two things together, you can imagine that you've moved it into this direction and it's going to get better and better. Probably in your history, we've had experience with the Dutch regulator around money laundering, and we were
Yeah.
promoting our AI capabilities on that. So those we push into this edge, but I don't want to put a hard number of used to be that and now is this, because I don't know if that is the story or the thing that you need to understand about this technology yet.
Yeah, but the customer service angle is really important because obviously people will get incredibly frustrated when AI service bots are poor. And at the same
Yeah.
time, it's one of the biggest workloads that you can automate. And you say you're at a point now where the feedback you're getting is that it's satisfactory, right?
Yeah, it's a 90% plus satisfactory. I think there's things that you should automate and things that you shouldn't automate, right? There are things like, I don't know, take ethics and morality and that type of category, but I don't think that is ripe for automation
Yeah,
by any
I
means.
hear you.
I think there's repetitive tasks that are ripe for automation. And in any customer service situation, there's a lot of repetitive questions, a lot of things that you can do, but there is a human in the loop component required at some point for certain things. So, we try and titrate that, tune that so that it works in the right balance. Sometimes we get it great, and sometimes we might not get it right, and we'll get feedback on that. Trust me, we're a consumer company.
Yeah.
So you move, you're still moving that. And it's still early days, right? Even with what we've done, it's still early days. It will get better and we will get better, but it still takes some more time to get this tuned just right. So that again, if we slice Gen AI and agentic, we get to a different conversation.
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like doing it within the confines of a banking license is also very tricky. But
Sure.
I mean, yeah, too many things to talk about. But with AI, I mean, we've talked about processes. It's really easy to do that, or at least talk about processes, maybe not to implement them so much. But strategy is the other side of it, because AI is changing the way people operate and is possibly influencing longer term decisions. Can you point to any ways in which AI has kind of informed your strategy lately and ways that you maybe wouldn't have done so otherwise?
Well, I think not, I wouldn't say lately, but maybe if lately is within the last 6 months.
Sure. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I mean, speed of growth, expansion, the ability to serve additional markets, the ability to serve our demographic that we focus on. So pointedly, that it influences that pretty much daily. Like, you want to make those decisions on how can you do it. Consider marketing. Like, how do you improve marketing by X% at some point because you've mastered, I wouldn't put mastered, but you've improved on your ability to use this technology. I struggle with the linguistics component of it, because at some point, we'll all recognize AI language. Like, we'll see it using the English language and we'll be like, I know where that came from. So that human in the loop component is very important, but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes that doesn't have to do with writing. It has to do with placement and algorithms and structure, the ability to sort of get into in marketing, of course, into the auction of whatever. Like, I think those are all places where there's incredible opportunity, and it informs our strategy constantly.
Yeah, got you. Okay, no, this is already fascinating stuff. I want to go back to Europe. We've talked about America, we've talked about AI. So obviously you're the second largest neobank in Europe, as I've said a few times. Does that scale change the way that people look at you? Regulators, partners, competitors. Do you feel a change in the way that the market has reacted to Bunq? Because for me, I mean, I always feel like you're more of an you're an established name now, whereas maybe years ago you'd be seen as this kind of punchy
Yeah,
upstart. A lot's
yeah,
changed.
yeah. Like, I think we had an early brand of maybe the bad boy of banking or something. I don't know how you would want to phrase that. Like, it's like,
No, that
look
was
at them.
DeFi. I think you're okay.
Yeah, they were like, oh, we're gonna go out and
Yeah.
all the challenger banks took this position of like revolutionizing banking, and now like we're basically setting the standards for banking. Like, everyone wants, the traditional banks need to operate in the way that we operate with the speed and things like that. Does it affect how people see the bank? Well, I think with size and scale and number of users, you have a greater responsibility, right? And you have to recognize your responsibility. That goes into trust, that goes into security, that goes into all of the things that are important to watch out for a user. So I do think that we feel the weight of that in a healthy way. Like, we feel like we are responsible, we have to be trustworthy, we have to get everything tighter and tighter at all times. So yes, it does. I do think that's changed. I think the premise of who we are as an organization and what we stand for. So we continue to stand for this audience. We continue to stand for the change that banking and financial technology has to represent as we evolve going forward. Like, in the world that you were just mentioning, like, we were one of the first banks to offer like flexible staking, right? That's
Yeah.
because guess what? They asked for it, and that's something that they wanted. So that is a responsibility we have. And as we grow, I think it's important we don't ever, and I don't think we can because it's culturally so wired in, let go of the voice of that user to direct what is right, what is wrong, where it has to go. But I do think we feel the weight of that trustworthy responsibility as we grow, definitely.
Yeah, and the user voice is really important, as you say. How do you go about that research? Like, what's your best approach to understanding what the user needs and then adjusting the business model accordingly?
Yeah, you talk to them. You like literally
Yeah.
speak with them. You have conversations, you run surveys, you understand them. You don't pretend you know something or just do it in an abstracted data way. You have a set of users that are on your app. You have a set of users that you desire to have a relationship with, and you engage with that group and you listen to what they have to say. I mean, that is a fundamental. I don't know how I can urge, because everybody pitches this user obsession thing in the
Mhm.
tech world. Like, they talk about it. I have been engaged with over 50 to 60 organizations. I can't find one that works like this. I mean,
Yeah.
that has the obsessive relationship in a good way, in a healthy way, with their user, the way that Bunq does. To really sit and understand it and connect at a level where it's, what does it mean? I mean, what do I want? What does it have? So I'll stop there. It's a bit abstract, but I mean, there's a
Yeah.
cultural machinery in the company that says we can't do shit unless this user, we can prove that it's good for that user. Like, we're not going to change the chairs in the cafe, in the lunchroom, unless somehow it's better for them.
Yeah, got you. Because what I was kind of asking more about was the process that you have for doing that. Because
Okay, so yeah,
obviously,
sorry.
yeah, you do listen to the user, right? But then sometimes the
Yeah,
user's wrong. Sometimes actually you know better than the user what the user wants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, in some cases,
your statement, not mine. So,
yeah, sure,
there's yeah. So we have, so our company operates in this kind of unique structure. And, the company's divided up into ownership. So forget hierarchies and think ownerships. So that's what do you own? What's the output? And there are people in the company who literally own our connection, not our connection, but our understanding and our information base on the user. So they're constantly running these things. Anything that we want to do, from a feature to a conversation we want to have, is tested, it's understood, it's represented by real people. So we have a process, step-by-step, clear process to basically reach out to the users to get their feedback and to get them to teach us what the next feature needs to be, rather than for us to lead them. At times you may think, "Oh, this is where we got to go." And then you go and they're like, I'd rather this button just worked right. And you're like, oh
yeah.
shit, I better engineer that before I engineer that. So there's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to. But there is, in our company, this ownership structure helps you understand like where that sits and how that works.
Got you. All right, and I'm going to finish by asking you one or two questions about yourself. I mean,
Oh,
as you said earlier, you're spot on that you do need to stay on top of your game, and track record doesn't mean you achieve anything. But at the same time, you have had an interesting career. I believe you've founded 5 companies, if I'm not mistaken, and
yeah.
been successful in doing so. So how have those experiences shaped what you've done at Bunq? How have the lessons you've learned along the way helped you make better decisions in your current role?
Yeah, I think of those companies, we had 2 exits and 3 failures, right? And you always learn more from your failures than you do your successes. And that some people, like I say, hopefully wise people learn more from their failures than they do their successes. And success, sometimes you were so good and it worked, and sometimes you're lucky. Both of those things are equally possible when it comes to having a great success. Failures are often your fault. And I think those failures, those experiences, those mistakes, those assumptions, ego, there's a layers of things that go into that, have taught me a lot about approaching what I would do with Bunq and where I can influence or where I should offer my experience. So I think that's the hard lessons that bring you to what am I good at? What am I not good at? Didn't know thyself. And I think that's part of how I bring it to Bunq. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I did.
No, you did. You did.
Okay.
And I think you met in it reiterating yourself a bit, but from the lessons that you've learned, there are things that you wish you'd known at the start when you set out, or is it more a case that you just have to try and fail?
No, yeah, there's a few things I wish I'd paid attention to, is probably what I would say. One is I think I wish I'd paid attention to, maybe it's ego, maybe it's assumption. Like I have a wonderful talent for convincing myself that I'm right. Right. And I had to learn how to,
Yeah,
how full of shit I
yeah,
was on
I might have
that.
one of them. Might be relatable, Joe. I won't. I won't
So
deny
for
it.
all of you who think you don't have that skill,
Yeah,
one of the greatest things is to learn how wrong you are, or to learn to be able to pay attention to
yeah,
that wavelength that comes in and says, "Oh man, this is," and you're like, "Wait a second." So I wish I had known. I wish I could have tuned that in, years before I did. I wish I could have tuned in how I lead and manage people. I think in the early days I was very like, do what I say, let's go, blah, blah, blah. And I was living off of energy and charisma and all that. And later I lived off of operations and details and structures and things that could scale. I believe in systems. And I think in the beginning I believed in energy, and now I believe in systems. I think systems scale and they grow and they can outlive me or anyone else. I think energy is a great way to infuse a system, but the system is more important. So I think I wish I'd known these things. I can think of at least one of the failure companies that would probably be a huge fucking success if I'd had some of this
yeah,
experience back then.
yeah. I think that's a really great point to close on, and I feel like anyone that's listened to the whole podcast has had a nice reward for doing so. That's a really fascinating point. Any final points before I wrap this one up, Joe?
Well, I think your podcast looks at fintech. I think it also looks at scale companies. And I would say just, amongst all of my feeling of how we build structures and how we build details and how we probably survive and grow a company through its operations, this is to the entrepreneurs out there. Just don't forget what you got into it for. I mean, I used to say, like, if you don't have a dream, you better get one, because it will be this driving force in your life. And I think this is an important point to make. If anybody wants to be an entrepreneur, or they're listening, or they're scaling, or they're in the middle of some shit situation that they just don't know the way out of, like, just keep grinding, because
Yeah.
some of my greatest successes I've ever had were out at the other end of like a real shitstorm of things I couldn't stand until I got there. So I hope people can see through that.
Amazing. Thank you, Joe. You're the first chief evangelist we've had. It is chief evangelist on the show. I think you might be the last that we have on the show, which doesn't mean you can't come back on another time.
Yeah, okay, like that sounds like I was being cut.
I just think you're a category of one, which is quite a fun thing to be. So, Joe, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining
man. Thanks,
LFG,
Ian.
and thanks everyone for listening in. That's us for this week.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, man. Bye.
Raising funds, speaking to club, drinking coffee and fire.